the road had not been paved for years. Only tourists passed through there, mostly young college students who were on a rural getaway to disconnect from the hectic pace of the city. Those who ended up in the hovel I called home were those who dared to stray a little from Donaldsonville, hoping to find some adventure in a wilder nature, and boy, did they find it, poor bastards. At first I felt a little sorry for them. Seeing people in the prime of life with a terrible fate awaiting them certainly turned my stomach. But after years of watching them disregard my warnings and even mock me, any empathy I might have felt had vanished. It had been 2 days since a group of kids had stopped by. I remember they didn't put on a very good face when I told them that despite the gas station sign, they couldn't fill up. As I used to do with everyone who passed by, I warned them not to go into the woods, because they would find something that wasn't meant to be found. They simply replied, "We don't believe in the superstitions of the country's people." I guess they found the rusty house, or rather, the rusty house found them. Bad luck, no one forced them to come. Like every night, I was sitting on the porch playing blues on my old cigar box guitar and drowning my sorrows in cans of cheap beer. That's when I heard the screams. I looked up and saw her. All of her body covered in blood and running towards me. Dear God. There's no way to find inspiration, I thought as I put my guitar away. The young woman came up to me crying, "Please, you have to help me. The others are dead. God, we have to call the police. I'm afraid the police won't be able to do anything." My words seemed to scare her. She took a step back. "Don't worry, I'm not one of them." Exhausted, she dropped into one of the porch rocking chairs and put her hands on her head. She kept crying for a while. I brought her a glass of water and tried to soothe her as best I could. "I don't understand. What are they? I warned you, young lady. But you guys never listen. Your arrogance doesn't let you see beyond your idyllic modern city life. You are not aware that God abandoned these woods many years ago." She looked at me, bewildered and frightened. "I'm sorry, kiddo, sometimes I lose my mind. This is a quiet lifestyle, but I haven't felt fulfilled lately. Answering your question, I have absolutely no idea what they are. It's something beyond human comprehension. That place you escaped from, the rusty house. Not everyone comes across it. One of you had something that attracted it, and that's why it invited you in. This can't be real. It invited us in? What the fuck does that mean? I've already told you. All I know is that they're part of something bigger, or at least that's what I've always been told, although God only knows what that means." "Who told you that?" "The ones who gave me this job. I used to live and work in the town. I didn't make much money, but at least I was doing something I liked. Every night, Thursday through Sunday, you could see me perform at Old Sam's Saloon. Isaac Lowe's Strings, the one-man band. I was practically only paid with food and free beers, but playing in front of those drunks made me happy. However, it wasn't the optimal job to make ends meet. So when I was offered this job, I had no choice but to take it. At first I was surprised. Work at a gas station that had been closed for years and so close to the area that no one dared to go? I was told not to worry about it. In their own words, my only job was to warn people like yourselves of the dangers that dwelled there. From this point on, It was up to you to decide whether to enter the forest or not. The sacrifice had to be voluntary. And that's how I became that hillbilly in every horror movie. Every day I regret not having followed in the steps of my old friend Hazel and hit the road in search of places to play. The life of a musician on the road, maybe that's what I need to feel alive again. Voluntary sacrifice? You knew this was going to happen. Hey, don't blame me. Didn't you hear what I said? I warned you and you still decided to go. That's why they call it voluntary sacrifice. This is crazy. What you're saying can't be true. She got up abruptly. I need to use your phone. I've already told you. The police can't do anything. They always stay away from this place. Besides, my phone can't make calls. It can only receive them. Look, I know nothing I say will cheer you up. But feel lucky. Not everyone is lucky enough to escape from that place. You can spend the night here and I'll drive you into town tomorrow. Lucky? My friends are dead. My boyfriend is. A deafening scream interrupted her. It wasn't a cry for help. No, 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 no. They're here. Shit. Were you in the basement? I remember that day so vividly. Even now, all these years later. It was early summer and the sun hung high in the sky, casting a heat that clung to everything like a damp cloth, the kind of heat that seems to radiate from the earth itself, turning the air into a thick, almost tangible mass. Alex and I had been stuck in the grind of city life for what felt like forever, rushing from one obligation to the next, our schedules filled to the brim with work and deadlines. We needed to escape, to disconnect. Shenandoah National Park, just a few hours outside the city, seemed like the perfect antidote. A weekend in the woods with the promise of fresh air, towering trees, and some of the most breathtaking views we could imagine. We both knew of Shenandoah's beauty, its sweeping vistas, the way the mountains roll into the distance, the way the sky turns pink and gold as the sun sets over the valleys. We'd heard the stories about the park's tranquility and isolation. How the night skies sparkled with stars you couldn't see in the city, and how you could find peace beneath the canopy of ancient trees. But what we didn't know was how quickly that peace could unravel, how quickly something so beautiful could turn into something terrifying. We arrived in the late afternoon, the sun beginning its slow descent behind the mountains, casting a golden light over everything. It felt like we were entering another world, one where time slowed down, where the hustle and bustle of the city were a distant memory. The air smelled fresh, almost sweet, with the scent of pine and earth. The breeze whispered through the leaves of the trees, and the distant sounds of birds and insects filled the air, creating a gentle soundtrack for the world we had stepped into. We set up camp near the Skyland area, a popular spot that's known for its stunning views and relative accessibility. It wasn't exactly a backwoods adventure, but it was the kind of place where you could escape for a few days without needing to trek for hours to find solitude. The Skyland area was surrounded by dense woods and wild meadows that wound their way through the forest, offering glimpses of breathtaking vistas. It was perfect for what we wanted, an easy escape, a chance to recharge. Little did we know that our peaceful retreat would quickly take a darker turn. After setting up camp, we spent the next few hours soaking in the beauty of the place. We didn't rush, didn't have a schedule to keep. Alex, as usual, was in high spirits. He tossed a stick for his dog, Max, who took off into the underbrush with a burst of energy. Max, with boundless enthusiasm for anything that involved running, jumping, or sniffing around in the woods. We both laughed as we watched him chase the stick, disappearing into the foliage, his tail a blur of motion. Do you think we could live here? Alex asked, casually, plopping down onto a large rock and looking out over the rolling hills that stretched in every direction. His tone was light, but there was an underlying sense of yearning, of Wishing for a simpler life, a life without the pressure of deadlines and expectations. I thought about it for a moment, my eyes scanning the horizon. It was tempting, the peace, the isolation, the beauty. It was everything we needed. But then my thoughts drifted to the harsh winters that could freeze this place solid, to the isolation that could feel suffocating if you weren't prepared for it. Maybe I said finally, but imagine the winters. It's beautiful now, but come January, it's a whole different world. Alex nodded, agreeing. Yeah, true. Snowed in for months. Not sure I'm ready for that kind of isolation. We spent the afternoon in a haze of easy conversation, talking about everything and nothing at all. It was the kind of conversation that only happens when you're with an old friend, when the world seems to slow down and the weight of the ordinary falls away. Max, after wearing himself out with a game of fetch, lay down at our feet, his tail thumping lazily against the ground. The fire crackled as we built it higher, sending a warm glow flickering into the gathering darkness. The sounds of the forest around us were soothing, almost hypnotic. The rustling of leaves in the breeze, the distant chirping of crickets, the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. Everything seemed so peaceful, too peaceful. As night fell, the temperature dropped quickly, the air turning cooler as the sun vanished behind the mountains. We huddled closer to the fire, the warmth of the flames a welcome contrast to the chill creeping in from the surrounding woods. The crackling of the fire was the only sound that accompanied our voices as we swapped stories. It felt like the world was a million miles away, like nothing could touch us here in the forest, wrapped in the safety of the firelight. But then something shifted. Max, who had been lying quietly by the fire, suddenly stiffened. His body went rigid, his tail flicking nervously. His ears stood straight up and his eyes locked on something in the darkness beyond the camp. The low growl that rumbled from his throat was like a warning, a deep guttural sound that sent a chill up my spine. It wasn't the playful growl of a dog guarding his territory, but something far more serious. Max, what is it? Alex asked, his voice a little unsteady. As he crouched down beside the dog, he reached out to calm him, but Max wouldn't budge. The growl deepened, a low, continuous rumble that seemed to vibrate in the air. Before we could process what was happening, we heard it, footsteps. They were soft at first, distant, but growing steadily louder, crunching through the underbrush, heavy and deliberate, too heavy for an animal, too purposeful to be a random wanderer. My pulse quickened, and the warmth of the fire suddenly felt far too distant. Hello, I called out, my voice steadier. Then I felt the footsteps didn't stop. They were moving closer, and I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. This wasn't right. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Alex grabbed the flashlight from his backpack, the beam of light cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing there, just the endless black of the woods, the trees bending in the wind, and the flickering light of the fire. The footsteps stopped. Let's check it out, Alex said, though his voice was tight with unease. We moved cautiously into the darkness, the flashlight beam trembling slightly in Alex's grip as we made our way toward the noise.